Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters. Today's show is broadcasting during Pride Month, and this is the conversation we're going to be having today because this is the show where we take a deep dive into all things mental health and well-being. I've got two guests on with me today and we're going to be unpacking a lot of the issues that are still unspoken. LGBT, who is the director of LGBTQ Bedfordshire, and Louise Bates of the Alzheimer Society. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Really impressed. Certainly in the UK, things are getting better, but we're not there yet, are we?
Definitely not.
So let's start with Pride Month.
Sure. Well, it's a celebration. So if you've ever been to a Pride festival, you'll know it's great fun.
It is.
But also it's a protest. So every time you're going to Pride, you are making a statement, which is really important. So every victory for equality that we've had as LGBTQ plus people has been really hard fought. So nothing's been sort of handed to us. We have to protest. So that's why Pride's so important. We fight for our victories, and we've had a lot, as you say, we've had a lot of change. So that's a good thing in that we're making real strides with this kind of thing. So pride, the word, is the opposite to shame. And actually, as LGBTQ plus people growing up, we're often made to feel shame about who we are. As you say, things are so much better than they used to be. But hate crimes, unfortunately, against LGBTQ plus people are increasing and have increased every year.
Oh my goodness.
Since COVID every year, and nobody knows why, but they go up and up and up. And where there's more LGBTQ plus visibility, unfortunately, there's more likely to be violence because we're showing ourselves.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, 70% of LGBTQ plus people are afraid to hold hands in public with their partner. So that's a huge number of people, isn't it?
That makes me really sad. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
I'm just thinking, in the UK, I thought we'd gone past this. I understand there's different cultures in different countries.
Yes.
But that shocks me.
Sure. It is shocking, but it's not surprising when you think about the fact that LGBTQ plus people are more likely to be the victims of crime. So actually, when you're going out with your partner, why would you put yourself at risk by showing affection? Because it's not just risk of violence, it might be risk of just having stuff shouted at you. And sometimes you just want to have a nice time. So actually, you can understand the reluctance to make yourself vulnerable in that way. So that's why Pride is an opportunity to show that.
Yes, and again, it's almost like everyone jokes about Valentine's Day, or why do we need Valentine's Day in order to go out and have a nice dinner? I find it absolutely heartbreaking. Why do we need Pride in order to hold hands with somebody we love?
Absolutely.
That's crazy to me.
But that's why it exists. But let's not forget, we're in a world where 11 countries in the world are being LGBTQ plus is punishable by execution. So that's why we need to make a stand and go, actually, that's not okay. And we're, in solidarity with people across the world. So for the UK, it's really important. So we've had Pride since 1972 here in the UK. So that was the first Pride March in London. It's grown. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's grown year on year.
I have.
And it's huge. Yeah, and June is the time for Pride. So that's when the first Stonewall riots took place in America. So they were in June, and that was the start of a civil rights movement. So we mark that occasion by having these celebrations and protests.
Oh, yes. And it's funny, I've always myself thought Pride, the parade, it was a form of protest, but then the fun was part of it. That's the funniest thing. I really always enjoy doing that because I've done it locally. And it's just such an uplifting event.
Yeah, you should enjoy it. That's we don't have to go and be miserable, but we are also
making a point,
commemorating, remembering, and making a point.
Oh, Brilliant. That's so definitely it's something to join in with in your own communities this month. Why? I know you've already kind of touched on this, but why is it that LGBTQ plus people often have either greater mental health issues or different mental health issues which are less easy to define?
We're more likely to have issues with addiction, substance misuse, and also more likely to harm ourselves. It's really hard to say why that is. I guess it goes back to those feelings of shame.
Shame. I was going to say, it does
which
relate.
we spoke about. It does relate to that. Also, I think we as LGBTQ plus people are more likely to be isolated or feel isolation. And we want to connect with each other, but actually sometimes the only spaces to do that are bars or late night venues where, you know, for people that are more likely to have addiction issues or problems with alcohol, it's counterproductive. So that's a shame. So we need more spaces where we can connect and do things other than party. Partying's fun, but actually it's fun to a point. Actually, we do just want to do stuff that's good for our well-being as well, and connect in different ways rather than just drinking.
Yeah, you know, and it's awful. I am embarrassed to say I don't really think about that as much, and I know that's something that is so important.
Yes.
Because anyone who is creating spaces out there, restaurants, cafes, anything like that, it is important to consider how safe your space is for everybody.
Yes, especially when, as we've spoken about, walking down the street can be a risk. So you're assessing your environment for risk all the time. And actually we need somewhere that says this is safe for you.
Yes.
And that might not be obvious, but as LGBTQ plus people, we would notice that.
Yes, no, and this kind of relates to the next question, because it is about making things explicit, in fact, that this is a safe space and so on. Coming out as an LGBTQ person, is that still necessary? And if so, why is it necessary?
First of all, coming out, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what that is.
Okay.
So it's about telling people about your identity, so revealing your true identity, whether that's with your sexual orientation or your gender identity. So that's what coming out is. But it's not this magical one-off where it's over and done with, and then you just go, you know, everyone was lovely and I can stop thinking about it now. Actually, as LGBTQ plus people, we come out every single day. So going to work, you know, if I'm working with a new team, if I'm meeting new people, really I'm coming out because I want to talk about my partner. I want to talk about my life. So we are coming out. Today I've had to come out. I'm coming here to talk to you about these things. So it's a coming out. So it's not a one-off. And I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding about that. Coming out, so in my organisation, LGBT Bedfordshire, we never strongly encourage people to come out. We say it can be a really good thing, but what we wouldn't say is everything's going to be fine, you should definitely do it.
Yeah.
Because actually it might not be safe for people to come out, it might not be feasible for people to come out. Some people never come out. And although you might think, well, that's sad, actually that's their decision. We would never pressure someone to do that. It can be a really great thing, but also you would need to think about the risks associated with that, and you would do so when you are ready to do that.
Yeah, because I think you're so right in saying it's a way of you being able to control your own narrative, you being able to control how people are going to think about you, and that's. Again, it's sad we have to do that at all, but I do understand that feeling of wanting to retain that.
It's your power, isn't it? It's your decision. You can choose if and when to do that. There's actually a new method of coming out. It's really interesting. It's called facilitated coming out.
Okay.
So people can get help with coming out. So an organisation like mine might, have that meeting with you if you want to tell someone and say the words, because sometimes just saying it for the first time is the difficult bit. So lots of people get help with doing that as well.
That's really important. And actually, anyone watching this and is thinking they want to have that facilitated support, how can they contact you? Or and could it be done over Zoom, that support being given?
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing?
absolutely. And if we can't help in your specific situation, we would direct you to an organisation that can. So you just visit us, www.lgbtbeds.org.
That's really helpful. Thank you, actually, on that. That's really helpful. And in what ways might we be able to identify that discrimination that does exist? Because we speak a lot about equality,
Yes.
and we've tackled the subject of race a number of times on this show. And one of the things people always say is, I didn't realise it was a microaggression. I didn't realise I was
Sure.
being discriminated against. And that's the same sort of question here. What do we need to look out for, especially if we're trying to be an ally as well?
Yeah, it's a good question, because actually I think discrimination generally has changed.
Yeah.
So for LGBTQ plus people, we were discriminated against by not having equal marriage, for example. So,
Right,
so
yes, of course.
laws discriminated against us, or we weren't able to adopt until 2003 as LGBTQ plus people. So that's discrimination. We weren't able to join the army, or we weren't able to donate blood until 2 years ago. And people don't know that, but that's a type of discrimination because there's no reason for that.
No.
So that's overcoming discrimination, but I do think it's changed and it's a little bit more subtle now. So and because discrimination is more subtle across the board, it's harder to call out and harder to challenge.
Yeah.
So some of the things that might happen is misgendering someone is discrimination, for example.
Yeah.
So not using someone's pronouns could be discrimination. Negativity or banter in the workplace because of sexual orientation or gender identity, that is discrimination. Rejection by family or friends is discrimination, of course, and that can be as a result of coming out. So, these things are, you can't always put your finger on that, but that could be a subtle form of discrimination. Also, there might be inadequate support for LGBTQ plus people. So, services related to health, mental health, well-being, physical health, sexual health, it might not be there. So that's discrimination. It's indirect, but it's also discrimination. So that's very difficult for lots of people.
Yes, which really kind of brings us on to how can we become better allies or advocates if it's something that we still, I guess, are understanding and processing, and this is making change in the workplace or in any organisation for anything that needs to be changed, sure. Because things have been so ingrained for such a long time, which I'm not saying it's right at all, but how can we be better?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying advocate. So again, in my organisation, we try not to say ally, just because ally to us means you've ticked a box once saying you're an ally, and you get an email occasionally and you don't do anything about it. I think an advocate is much more active. So you really are showing up and standing up for things, and that's really important. So advocacy means learning for yourself as well, finding out what the issues are, not necessarily relying on an LGBTQ plus person to teach you, but you going and learning and reading about the history, and perspective taking is really important as well. So part of being an advocate would be challenging unacceptable behaviour and language, even when that person's not there, when the LGBTQ plus person isn't there. So you would still act the same, whether they're there or not. Using your pronouns in communication is really important as well, because it just makes it easier for people where that's important. And marking awareness days and celebrating important dates. Using visual signs of affirmation. So just making sure, if it's Pride Month, you put up your flag. People might not notice, but for an LGBTQ plus person, they will. And that will show them actually this is a safe environment, you're a safe person for me. So small things like that make a big difference.
Yes, yeah. That's really so straightforward. But I really take your point about standing up even when the person's not in the room.
Yes.
Huge. That's a massive thing for anything that's also sexism, racism, ageism, all of the areas of discrimination. We need to be learning to do that.
Always the same.
Absolutely. So what support is available for, say, organisations wanting to make changes, or people wanting to learn more, as well as people in the LGBTQ plus community?
You would contact organisations like ours, so LGBT Bedfordshire, for example, and groups like ours. So our strands are education, so we will run sessions and teach people about things, including companies. We will also connect people with each other, so addressing that isolation, and also we support and advocate for people, especially around well-being. I think that's really important at the moment. There are also pride groups across the country, across the world, who run activities not just in June but throughout the year, and that can be really beneficial for people that feel isolated, so social activities as well. There's lots of LGBTQ plus organisations that run virtual activities as well, because not everyone's ready to be marching in a pride. So actually you might still want to get involved, but you don't have to physically be there. You can join something online. You might want to join a book club, an art club. I know there are lots of those online. So that's really important. In terms of specific organisations, we have Switchboard, which is a good one for LGBTQ plus people. It's a directory, it's national, and people with any questions about sexual orientation, gender identity, coming out, well-being, you can just phone and they will help you. They're there all the time. For trans people, we have Trans Wiki, which will direct people to local trans support groups, which is really important. And we have an organisation called Mind Out, which is specific wellbeing support for LGBTQ plus people. So there are some really niche issues in the community, and they'll be able to help us.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. You're just so enlightening. It's such a fascinating and important conversation. Ashley, you are staying with us now, so thank you. Because we're going to be bringing on Louise Bates of the Alzheimer Society, because there are many issues relating to LGBTQ plus history which we don't actually talk about if somebody is diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. But before that, we're going over to our sex therapist, Madina Demirbas, who is going to be talking to us about specific LGBTQ plus issues.
Hello, today I would like to talk about the typical issues that an LGBTQ plus community members would go through in their relationships. And number one is gender transition. It happens very often that, for example, Lisa and Anna started as a couple, but that at some point Anna decided to change her sex and to start, for example, hormonal supplements. How would Lisa react to that? And very often Lisa would find herself in a different place, knowing that Anna wants to change her sex. Number two issues that we observe is the discordant outletness. It means that one of the partners, usually within the relationship, is more at ease, is more comfortable with their sexuality than their partner. It happens for a number of reasons, because of personal characteristics or because of the support, the psycho-emotional support that they have received in their childhood, whereas their partner or partners didn't receive this support and therefore experience much more shame in their current life about their sexual orientation. But what happens is that the person who is more at ease very often further shames their partner for not being at ease with that. And the way to go about it would be to provide more space for their communication and to understand that they might have had completely different experience. And in some cases, the coming out for this partner could be the loss of a certain relationship or even workplace, or in some countries, unfortunately, still illegal. So these things should always be taken into account. And issue number three that we encounter as therapists is parenting. Parenting is always hard for any couple, but especially for the LGBTQ plus community members, it could be extra challenging because it includes many other questions. For example, like if it's a gay couple, then who will be the donor? And who will be taking the responsibility of a child when, or children when they're born? Or should they be adopted, for example? Very, very different. There could be completely different views within the couple. If it's a lesbian couple, who will bear a child and why? And who will go through all this transformation with the body? One of the books that I highly recommend on this topic was written by the comedian Jen Brister, and it's a memoir of her experience as a non-biological mother of their twin sons, and what it really takes and how the whole relationship becomes at stake even during the decision-making process. If it's, for example, a polyamorous group which is not untypical in LGBTQ plus community, how will the child or children be, what will be the roles between the partners, and who will take care of whom? These are all very complicated issues that should be discussed, and sometimes, which is absolutely normal, a couple or a group gets stuck in their communication. It's perfectly fine. That's probably just the time for a group or a couple to address somebody professional and help just the communication. Then the couple or the group will make the decision that fits for them.
Greetings, I'm Angel Marie Monticelli, host of Energize You TV, every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. Go to Fresh Takes right here on E360 and get Reikified and energized today.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. We are discussing the issues that are essential to talk about within the LGBTQ plus community. We've just had Ashley Spiers on the show talking about all of the things that he does in order to support people within that community. And now we've got Louise Bates of the Alzheimer Society joining us. Welcome to the show, Louise.
Thanks very much for having me.
It's a pleasure to chat with you. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations because I think these are so important to have. And if it just sparks discussion, that's something that we've done. Louise, please tell me about the work with the Alzheimer Society, first of all, and then how somebody with an within the LGBTQ plus community, how they might experience a diagnosis of dementia very differently.
Yes, absolutely. So Alzheimer Society is the UK's leading charity for dementia support. We are supporting people through frontline services. We're funding research into dementia, and we're also campaigning for change at national policy level. That includes actually funding research into the LGBTQ plus community and lived experience of dementia. We know that dementia doesn't discriminate. It can affect anybody at any time of life. So we're working with communities across the board to really understand their lived experience of dementia and ensure that the provision of support is available to them. So there are currently 900,000 people across the UK living with dementia and 700,000 unpaid carers. So those are people who would either be friends, family members who are providing care in a non-professional context. That's a lot of people. And in terms of the lived experience for LGBTQ plus people affected by dementia, it's not spoken about enough. No. Now, I'm also the co-chair of the Staff and Volunteer LGBTQ plus network at Alzheimer Society, and I'm really here today to bring light to the topic. Dementia can affect people in a number of different ways. But the most common symptom associated with dementia, and specifically Alzheimer's disease, is memory loss. And when we think about memory loss, or we think about regressing to an earlier time in our life, we have to take into account the lived experience of that individual.
Yes.
So when we start thinking about LGBTQ plus and dementia, we start thinking about queer history. If we think about the fact that most people living with dementia typically are diagnosed towards middle to later life, And then we start looking at the queer history timeline. 1967 is when sex between two men was decriminalised. And in fact, if we fast forward all the way up, it's mind-blowing to me to think that Section 28, which prevented any public funded institution, that included schools, from promoting, I think the words were homosexuality as a pretended family construct, was the wording. That wasn't repealed until 2003. That wasn't repealed until I was halfway through secondary school, which is mind-blowing to me.
And I was a teacher in 2003, so if I'd have said to my students, it's okay to be gay, I could have been put in prison.
That's outrageous.
So when we're thinking about the lived experience, we need to think about what could that look like for a person living with dementia. It was really interesting, Ashley, you talked about a number of what we would call modifiable risk factors for dementia.
Right.
So alcohol abuse, higher levels of smoking, higher levels of poor mental health. These things are all modifiable risk factors for dementia. And we know that the Lancet Commission identified that the LGBT community is at higher risk, specifically in these areas. But the example I often use when I'm trying to paint kind of a picture for someone is saying, I'd like you to imagine that you know a gentleman who's living with dementia. And his dementia has caused him to go back to an earlier time in his life. Now, he's in his 80s, he's an openly gay man, and he's gone out for a walk to the local shops. And a couple of hours have passed and he's not returned. And you, as his friend, or perhaps carer, or perhaps partner, family member, might have concerns. So you might be putting out a missing persons call for this individual. Now, if that person is approached by a police officer in uniform,
oh my goodness,
what might that person's response be towards that officer? They might be perceived as aggressive. They might be perceived with negative behaviour. And actually, it could just be that this gentleman has gone back to a time where he's living in fear of police persecution. And so his dementia is then causing him to relive those experiences. Memory problems can also create gender dysphoria. So if we think about somebody who is post-transition, then if they have time shifted and gone back to an earlier time in their life, the person they see in the mirror might not be the person they can reconcile with their authentic self and how they are currently presenting. It can have huge impacts on people's mental well-being. If you go back to a time in your life where you don't believe you can hold your partner's hand for fear of persecution, you don't believe that you can trust medical professionals or police for support, if you are living in constant fear, the dementia can take you back to that time of living in constant fear. And that can put further strain on a person's mental health and well-being.
Of course.
On top of the symptoms of all of the concerns of not understanding why your cognitive functioning symptoms might be occurring. So you're almost seeing a doubling down on mental stress. We also know that older LGBT people are more likely to be single, they're more likely to live alone. Many won't have contact with biological family networks. So then we have many people in our community have what we call a family of choice, which are friends that you have welcomed into your family. But it means this is also why talking about this is so important, because getting a diagnosis as soon as possible enables you to plan for the future. You want to choose your healthcare journey. You want to be able to choose who is going to advocate for you later down the line when the disease has progressed to a point where perhaps you may lose mental capacity, or decision-making ability. So it's really, really important that people start seeking diagnosis as soon as possible.
Wow, gosh.
So we also, a really interesting statistic I read recently was something like 1 in 7 LGBT people won't seek medical support because they still fear discrimination in a medical and healthcare setting.
I mean, I see you nodding all the way through this.
It's clear that discrimination exists in the health and social care sector. particularly for older LGBTQ plus people. There were specific organisations that addressed that actually. One specifically was called Opening Doors London, but unfortunately closed this year due to underfunding. But what you're saying really resonates, because I think there's a real need there actually.
There is.
It's kind of unspoken.
Yeah, because if we don't think about this, then there's nothing going to be put in place, and it's not for want of not wanting to put something in place. I mean, that kind of brings me on to the next point about the role of carers, because
Absolutely.
how do they need to adapt? I mean, I understand if it's a friend and somebody who knows that person really well, they can learn this. They can go to the Alzheimer Society, they can learn. But what about somebody who is just trained as a carer and they don't have that training? What extra ways in which do people need to adapt their understanding?
I think there's a number of different ways of looking at this,
Right.
whether you're looking at unpaid carers, who are people who are friends, family, next of kin, who are taking on that caring
Yeah.
responsibility, versus the professional
Yes.
caregiving,
Yeah.
caregiving as a profession. And there are multiple sides to this.
Yeah.
So thinking about if you are an LGBTQ plus person in a relationship, your partner develops dementia and you become their carer,
Yes.
there are things that are going to be incredibly emotionally taxing on you.
Because
So-
where they are placed
Because
as
of
well.
where
Memory,
they have
yeah.
gone back to in their life. And there are things to consider. It's really important to remember that if your partner starts pushing you away, if your partner starts referring to you as their friend and not as their partner, that's not them talking.
Yeah.
That's the dementia talking.
Yeah.
And being able to make that separation can really help with processing some of those challenges, and understanding that they've gone back to this place of fear. And so trying to be really reassuring with that. If someone may identify differently day to day, they might struggle with remembering who they've come out to. So you might have lots of challenges around that. And it's, again, important just to respond as that person is presenting at any given time. Then we also have the other side of the coin, which is if you are an LGBTQ plus carer and you are then perhaps caring for a parent who might be a heterosexual parent
Who?
living with dementia,
Yes.
then it was really great to hear you talk earlier about how coming out is not a one-time thing, it's consistent. That might become very true in this instance,
gosh,
because every time you go to visit, you might bring your partner, and you might have to come out time and time and time again to your parent just because they're living with short-term memory loss.
Yeah.
So again, that can put tax and strain on a person as a carer. In terms of people who are offering care in a professional capacity, training is the most important thing. There are lots of concerns, and unfortunately I have heard lots of stories of where there have been cultural differences between someone from a care profession who comes from a different cultural background coming into someone's home. It was heartbreaking to hear. There was one of our ambassadors spoke about a friend of his. Whenever they're expecting a home care visit, this person goes around and they take all of the pictures off the wall.
That's so sad. Yeah.
Because they say, I don't know who is going to be coming into my home. I don't know who any of these organisations or agencies are sending out. I don't know who might be coming into my home. And I don't know whether they're going to be accepting of me and my lifestyle. There's also the issues of if the person receiving care or needing additional home support is transgender, then again there's issues around personal care and gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
So again, it's really important that professionals are properly trained and able to support people in an empathetic and compassionate way.
Yeah.
And I think compassion just generally goes a long, long way
Yes.
in supporting people.
People who are professionals, maybe from countries where being LGBTQ plus is illegal, so it's not necessarily automatic for them to come in and just be okay with this. So you're quite right. It's about education, and although it's hard to change people's views that are so ingrained, that's not the purpose. The purpose is to train them to not discriminate.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Absolutely. That's a very key point. Very key point. And kind of just pulling on that thread a little bit more. I think something that we, as a heterosexual person identifying as female, I still struggle to really understand that real shame, that embedded sense of, I don't know whether I'm safe here. And I think that's where a lot of people do still struggle, and that's where compassion and empathy is so important. Are there any ways, just either of you, that would help people kind of really get it, really get that's where somebody's come from?
I think it's really about education.
Yeah.
So at Alzheimer Society, we have 2 publications. One that is written specifically for an LGBT person with a diagnosis of dementia, around what to expect and how they can support themselves through that journey.
Right.
But we also have a publication for carers, and it's an incredibly relevant resource for professional caregivers as well. So I really recommend anyone who's interested, do visit the Alzheimer Society website and do take a look at our list of publications, because we have more information than you can shake a stick at on there. But I think it really fundamentally, it does come down to education.
And education that uses the method of perspective taking, not just goal setting.
Yes. It is about really understanding what it feels like to be in that person's experience. That's so important.
And I think it's also looking at the cross-sectionality of where that fear can come from to make it relatable to people as well. So, for me, as a bisexual woman, there's a lot of crossover in the sense of not belonging between bisexual people and people of mixed race heritage.
Yes.
So again, it's looking at where are the intersectionalities that can help make that feeling more relatable to people.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And relating to that now with bisexuality,
yes.
This is a key topic for you, because somebody who's bisexual may be feeling, well, I'm not quite LGBTQ enough to fit into that community. Will I be rejected? But then I'm not heterosexual enough to fit into. There's more mental. Are there more mental health issues, or is it just unspoken?
Yes.
Right.
So it's the short answer.
Yes.
So for me personally, talking about bisexuality is a really important thing. The B in the LGBTQ plus acronym is actually the largest populace of the community. If you look at 2021 census data, in most geographical areas, the number of lesbian and gay individuals, if you add those numbers together, you get the number of bisexual people living in that local authority. And yet we are the most hidden. We are the most camouflaged. And that's not necessarily always through choice. So I always used to say to people, I picked a person, I didn't pick a side. But my partner is a heterosexual, cisgendered male, and it means that when we walk down the street, people will automatically assume that I am heterosexual. The same bias applies the other way. If I was dating a woman and I was in an LGBTQ plus space, I would automatically be assigned the label of lesbian. Bisexual people face a lot of very unique prejudices, which can unfortunately occur from both sides. There are LGBT spaces that are less welcoming towards the bi community. There are prejudices around narrative. I've heard of a woman who went on, well, this isn't a one-off case, I've heard multiple instances of a woman who, for example, went on a date with a lesbian, and when they arrived at that date and when she revealed herself to be bisexual, the lesbian woman basically ended the date there and just said, how do I know that you're not going to take the easy road out? How do I know that you're not going to...
Phrasing though, easy road out.
Yeah. Why would you, it was why would you make your life harder if you've got that option, the other option? There's a lot of, this is what we refer to as biphobia. And there is a specific term for it. This is how... Oh my
goodness, my mind is blown.
Yeah, this is how prevalent the issue is you've got biphobia as its own term, which kind of encapsulates all of the negative stereotypes and prejudices surrounding bisexuality, that bi people are more promiscuous, that they are more sexually freely available, that it's not a valid sexual identity in of itself. It's like, oh, well, are you sure you're just not gay? Like, are you on your way to coming out? Which for some people, it is a valid step in that journey.
But not for
But
everyone.
there's a lot of us who are sat here just going, no, we're just not monosexual.
yeah, I see you nodding, really.
Yeah. I was just to echo it, because it was it's often seen as a phase, and bisexuality in itself is a you know, a legitimate sexual orientation, but the discrimination often comes from within the community, and that's really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, how do you? Sorry, I'm just throwing that in there. How do you address that? Because clearly, LGBTQ, it's part of the acronym. We need to be accepting all the way across the board.
It's about visibility. And having these sorts of conversations. There are awareness days for bisexuality, and it's about marking that and going, look, this is valid, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And when we put it in the context of mental health, every report across the last 15, 20 years has shown that bisexual people are at higher risk of suicidal ideation, they're at higher risk of poor mental health. They're also, unfortunately, at staggeringly higher risk of sexual assault.
Gosh. Oh my goodness.
Both more so than their heterosexual and their lesbian and gay counterparts.
I mean, it's so clear, just listening to both of you. On the one hand, I started this show thinking, well, the UK, we've come quite far. And then I said it. I don't think we have. I think we've either, have we uncovered more issues, which is actually a good thing, because I think sometimes when you start addressing something, you find more stuff, but then you need to address that as well. And that's okay, because we're going in the right direction. Or is there just so much that still needs to be done?
I think it goes back and forth. That's been my experience. I think things get really good, and then we kind of go back as a society. Because I remember in the early 2000s being really excited that, you know, we were about to get equal marriage and things like that, and thinking, actually, we're there, we've done it. And then rights slowly being taken back away, including, you know, trans rights, trans acceptance, and laws around trans people as well. And you think, well, we'd come so far, we've gone back the other way a little bit.
Absolutely, and seeing that echoed in the dementia field and care settings and hospital settings, and people still telling us that, you know, I'm terrified of developing dementia not because of the diagnosis of dementia itself, but because of the care provision factors that come after that. If I go into a hospital, which ward are they going to put me on? If I lose capacity and I go into residential care, is my authentic self going to be supported and respected? There are so many people from particularly the older section of the LGBT community who, if their partner does develop dementia, will opt to care for their partner at home until death, because they are so petrified of the prejudice.
Judging, yeah. I could carry on speaking with both of you all day, and please do come back on another show, because I think there's so much more we need to discuss. We're going to go over now to Susan Popoola, who will be giving her tips for acceptance in the workplace when it comes to leadership.
So I'm going to give 3 top tips for leaders. First and foremost, know your why. Know why you're doing what you're doing. What's the purpose, why it interests you, because that's what will get you up each morning. And when things go wrong, it means that's the reason why you continue to focus and continue to do what you're doing. Have a support team around you, people that you can rely on, whether that's people outside of your organisation, mastermind, people that support you, dare I say, like myself, and employees, family, what have you. But make sure that you've got a good support network around you to enable you to do what you do effectively. And third and finally, think about the people that you employ and engage. Employ people first and foremost whether that's employees or freelance basis suppliers or what have you. As much as possible, people that share your values, your purpose, they understand and there's an alignment, and bring their expertise in to help you to achieve your optimum outcomes. And so I wish you all the very best in your leadership journey, because bonus tip, enjoy the journey.
These are my top tips for being a really good advocate for LGBTQ plus people. Firstly, listen to voices from within the community and really listen to what people are saying. Secondly, showing up to stuff and fighting for good causes, even if that means going to a Pride event. We'd be glad to have you. Number 3, learn things for yourself. Read and learn what you can about our stories and our history. Number 4, challenge discriminatory language or behaviour when you see it, even when there isn't an LGBTQ plus person present. Number 5, use people's pronouns and make sure you introduce your own whenever you have an opportunity, even if that's on social media. And finally, support awareness days and put up a Progress Pride flag whenever you have the opportunity.
I wanted to talk about what you can do if you are facing discrimination in the workplace. And these are tips from ACAS, and I would always recommend going to the ACAS website. What they will say is you need to make notes, things like what happened, how it made you feel, dates and times, evidence. Evidence is so important, whether that's screenshots, emails, social media posts, and also if there are any witnesses. And something which I hate to say, but in my experience I have had this, sometimes your emails are not necessarily safe if you just leave them in the workplace. They can disappear. So I used to send emails back to my personal address as well. So please get that evidence. Now, there are ways of doing this, and I've got the notes written down from ACAS, so you can go to their website. It is usually best, they suggest, to raise the problem informally first. That is, speaking to your manager. However, extra problems come in if it's your manager actually causing the problem. So HR can be a very good place, and always remember you can have somebody in with you. That's really important. If you're a member of a union, it can be someone from that union. However, don't forget you can raise a formal grievance if you have tried the informal route and it doesn't work, or for some reason that route is not appropriate for you. If you do go onto the ACAS website, you will find out more information, and that is www.acas.org.uk.
Dementia is the leading cause of death in the UK. 1 in 3 people born today will go on to develop the condition. If you have any concern about your memory, please do reach out to your GP. If you're not sure how to facilitate that conversation, visit the Alzheimer Society website. We have a checklist that we have made in partnership with GPs that will help you through that conversation at the practice, that will help you to have that conversation, explain your concerns and your symptoms. Seeking a diagnosis as early as possible is vital to enable you to be able to plan for the future and put as much in place to maintain and support your independence for as long as possible. Please visit the Alzheimer Society website to download all of our LGBTQ+ resources, which will help you understand how dementia will affect an LGBTQ+ person and the various ways that you can support them.
Welcome back to the final part of Mental Health Matters. It's been a real pleasure to speak with both of you and to learn so much from you, and there is still so much to learn. If we're all thinking now, wow, I've got quite a long way to go myself, what is one thing, one action point that we could do now after watching this broadcast that we can do to be better advocates?
Go and talk to someone. Go and talk to a friend. If you're an advocate, go and talk to an LGBTQ plus person, ask them how they are, and ask them, what do I need to know?
Absolutely. Education for me is always first and foremost. Take the time to do your research. It's not down just to our community to educate about our community. The information is out there and it's available, so be proactive. Find that information, visit Stonewall. They've got a fantastic glossary, an index glossary that will talk you through all of the various terminology if you're unsure.
Amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a healthy week and we'll see you next week.